Welcome back, everybody. Hi. If you are watching this on YouTube, welcome. We are finally in video format. If you are one of my OG podcast listeners, this will not feel any different for you. But if you're feeling like you are someone who wants to experience this with my face, saying the words, find us online. Okay, everyone. Today, I am really excited to talk about the F word. You got it. I'm talking about failure. Yes, this has been a huge, huge, huge topic in my friend group right now and in life in general. And so today on Kind of a Bitch, we are going to talk about this particular fear of failure. I personally feel that we treat failure like it's contagious. Okay? Like if you admit to that you failed something, or if you are publicly seen as a failure, like losing a game or messing up an audition, as I have done many a time, you are suddenly deemed unworthy or unqualified or maybe even unlovable. Not enough, right? There's so many different things that we label ourselves in the world of being a quote unquote failure. But I want to tell you something. Failure is one of the most acute, fiercest, and most honest teachers I think I've ever had. And I believe that many people would agree with that testament. So this episode is all about flipping the script on failure, how we define it, how we experience it, maybe even how we fear it, and then how we can reclaim this particular very natural event in our lives, um, so that we can create more of a fuel for our fire. This is not going to be a pep talk. I mean, maybe it will a little bit. I don't know. I feel like I usually tend to go a little bit in the pep talk arena. So maybe it will feel a little bit like that. But I do want it to be more of a reframing. I want to talk about some of my stories, some honest truths that I'm currently feeling in my own life, and potentially some tools that you listening or watching here can actually use. I want to talk about the conditioning around failure. Like, who taught us to fear failure? I personally feel that women specifically are often taught to seek perfection, not growth. We are taught to seek safety, not risk. We're trained to be liked more than we are trained to be bold and unapologetically ourselves. That's kind of where this came from. When I think about failure, I think a lot about this a woman who I heard on a podcast long ago. Her name is Erin Linden, and she is a president of a company called Poker Power. This is a women's poker group where they basically bring women from all walks of life, CEOs, small business owners, career-driven women, as well as women who are potentially not looking to show up in a career space, but more in a personal space. And they teach them how to play poker. The whole idea behind this company is that women are taught to stay safe and men are taught to take risks. So the exact quote, I will read it here, is men are taught to play to win and women are taught to play not to lose. Okay. There's in a lot of these discussions, she talks about how taking risks or being less afraid of failure translates to how you go about like asking for a promotion or having the courage to negotiate your salary, which I will get to here in a little bit. Maybe even like negotiating with your partner about different roles that you have in the house. Or, if you were me, showing up in an audition room, going to an audition, or trying out for a role that maybe feels out of your comfort zone. There are just so many elements of life, I think, where getting comfortable with taking a risk, knowing that failure could be on the other side, is going to be the thing that helps accelerate your success. As somebody who teaches people how to speak in public, if you are new here, I am not only a real estate broker here in the Seattle area, but I'm also a public speaking and communication coach. I work with companies, especially tech companies, all around all around the country at this point, to help people become more efficient communicators, confident communicators, and be more authentically themselves so that they can make more authentic relationships, have better engagement with the clientele that they are talking with. And in certain instances, I also coach people on the art of storytelling within business. And something I find a lot, especially in the world of public speaking, because public speaking, if you don't know, is many people's number one fear, like before death, which is kind of funny, but also heartbreaking in so many ways, especially in a world where all of us are, have these devices attached to us at all times where we can be seen and contacted. Um, I find that these folks, they fear being seen as too much. They fear showing up in a way that is very authentic to them. They fear asking for what they're worth. They fear having hard conversations because at the end of it all, the fear of failure, of rejection, of not winning becomes really big and really scary. So I find that people tend to not show up at all. And something I was talking about with a girlfriend earlier today actually was about this idea of showing up as someone who doesn't care, right? Like showing up as someone who's so chill and so relaxed, and I don't care about that. Like we pretend that we don't care when we do, because I think that if we are not trying as hard, um, you don't have to feel the sting if it goes badly, right? You don't have to feel the embarrassment of showing up fully and boldly and losing or not booking the job. We show up as lesser versions so that we can't be fully rejected. I'm not a therapist. That's just what I think. Okay. So when I think about this too, I think a lot about, what are the situations for me where I showed up maybe in a more reserved way, or I avoided a risk because I didn't want to fail. And the one that really comes up for me, there are two. It's kind of a before and an after. Is when I first came back to Seattle. I've shared this before in the podcast, but I got a job at a nonprofit, and when I went in for that interview, that was the first real interview that I had gone to, because before that I was a performer. My interviews were auditions, and that is still something I say when my husband's going in for an interview or has a pitch. I'm like, do you have an audition? Like that will stay in my brain forever. And the only other jobs that I'd really interviewed for would have been for restaurant work or for childcare services, which were all things that I had a lot of experience in. And so going in as a nonprofit for a nonprofit I was completely out of my depth. And all I could do was figure out ways to reframe the experiences I'd already had as a performer, not only as a performer, but also as a company manager, as a vocal captain, as a choreographer, right? All of these different things that lend themselves to different areas of professionalism, but a lot of straight laced jobs don't necessarily see those skills in that way. So I tried so hard to reframe those things. And I'll tell you what, I got a job as the director for an event that was for our entire area, that women and CEOs and people from all walks of life, women from all walks of life would be attending and supporting. A director for an enormous event. I had no clue what I was doing. And that's where I'm just like, thank goodness for my theater degree. But when I tell you that I got the offer, and for me, I'd never had a salary. That was not something that I had experience with. I didn't understand benefits. I didn't understand the time commitment. I didn't really understand how to negotiate at all. And so when I got the offer, I remember thinking to myself, wow, I really hope that I get a certain number, not knowing really what that would mean, but just, kind of guessing. And the number that I got, I said to myself, you know what? I'm just going to take it. I don't even want to negotiate, because what if I ask and then I lose the job altogether? What if I ask for more and she says, actually, we're going to give it to somebody else? So, this fear of having this thing taken away from me that I didn't even yet have stopped me from advocating for myself and for what I truly needed. And at the time, it didn't feel too bad because I figured, meh, good enough. I've not had a job like this before, so I might as well. It's not going to be a big deal. Until a few months in, when I found out that people who were in the same position as me, And I think now that I'm reflecting on it, it might have been as someone who was in um, a slightly more subordinate, like she was more on my team of sorts, that she was making the same amount as me. And I remember finding that out. And yes, of course, I was happy before and then was unhappy. But I think it really put things into perspective that if I had simply asked, I could have at least, yes, I might have gotten a no, but the likelihood that they would take it away altogether was low. And I could have made myself extra thousands of dollars a year, which really would have benefited me. And that experience, I think about it a lot actually, because I have a lot of, now that I'm in another profession where I am working with risk all the time, the role of a real estate agent is not to tell people how to buy their house, but it is to give them the tools to make smart and strategic offers to win the home that they want. And same thing if you're helping clients sell their home, it's to make strategic moves, market it strategically so that you get the response that you want. I will talk about this from a buyer perspective. One of the things that buyers often fear. So if you have bought a house, this will feel familiar for you. If you have not bought a house, don't worry about it. A lot of buyers believe that once you get under contract and you do an inspection, when you include an inspection contingency, it means that you get to do an inspection and then you get to ask for repairs or fixes if you want. You can also, of course, accept it as is, or you can even back out of the transaction. It is totally up to you. But a lot of buyers don't realize that when in the state of Washington, I can't speak for other states, when you ask for repairs or fixes, the seller cannot back out. So oftentimes I will be met with resistance. Buyers won't even want to ask for anything because they are so excited that they have won a home that they just want to say, fine, 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 we'll take it, even when there are big problems. And a lot of my job is to educate them and say, the only thing the seller can say to us if we ask is yes, we'll do it all. No, we won't do all of it. And here is our, other options, what like they want to do something different for us. Or they can say, no, we won't do any of it. But that's it. They can't end the transaction. They can't give the house to somebody else. There is so much more power than these buyers realize, but the fear of losing the thing that they want is so high that they block themselves from advocating for the things that they really need. And so when this happened with clients of mine, it now would be years ago, we had negotiated in the beginning for closing credits. That means that the seller is giving some of the funds from their closing costs to cover a rate buy down. In this case, we were using it for a rate buy down for my clients. And then we did an inspection and we found out that the furnace was really old, really, really old, like on its deathbed old. And the water heater was also near the end of its life. And so I said, these are going to be big expenses. These are going to potentially be big costs for you only moments into owning your home. I think we should ask for them. And my clients were so resistant to asking because they didn't want to lose their house. And luckily, after finding out that there was not a risk of them losing the house, the only risk was to be told no. And then we would have to pivot and decide if we wanted to go a different direction. We asked for it. We got both the things. And those clients ended up getting a situation that really, really worked for them because they were willing to, for them, take a risk. Whereas I kind of knew in this case, asking is not the risk in real estate in this particular scenario. I think that failure is particularly scary when there is something specific to lose, right? Um, but I guess my question here is like, what about just being witnessed at failing is the thing that holds us back? Because I know for me, I hate being witnessed as a failure. I hate being seen in progress because the idea of letting people watch me fail feels humiliating. And what I found when I have failed in front of people, whether that's messing up my lines in a show, um, cracking on a note that was hard for me, uh, maybe not booking the listing, not getting the listing, is that all it does is it's a little auto correction in the right direction. towards something else, right? And even though it might kill me down to my core a little bit, I need to take a day to lick my wounds. I found that usually that small autocorrection is leading me to something better. So, my question for you here is, what is one risk you've talked yourself out of? Not because it wasn't right, but because you were afraid to fail. What about the truth of failure? I've alluded to this. This is going to be the reframe. I want to challenge the idea that failure equals weakness. I personally, for myself, need to reframe failure constantly as feedback, as data, right? Like when you fail, you are learning what doesn't work, or maybe what does work, right? You are learning what works by discovering what doesn't work. This is something that I learn from my personal trainer all the time. When I go in there and we are trying to incrementally move me up to lift heavier and heavier and heavier, and I'm in a squat and I get down there and I start to push, 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 but I can't quite get out of that squat and she has to help me up. I've technically failed, right? And for some reason, maybe because I'm there being walked through the experience of failure by somebody, she always just says, great, all right, that's data, right? Like now we kind of know what to do for the next week or so that we can get you there. There's also a lot of other things that are potentially in slash out of your control, like how much sleep did you get? Did you do your lift this week? Did you eat enough food, which is a big problem for me? Did you eat enough? Um, Maybe are you already tired because you worked out too much this week, right? There's so much more data that teaches me why I didn't make that lift. And I just love the idea that, like, it's not a failure, it's just data. It's just helping me discover what I need to do better for next time. And there's no stakes. I think what I also like about failure, as I kind of mentioned, is that it helps you refine. Like you get clearer and sharper and bolder with your moves through the flops, through the failure. And you also get to filter. You find your people, your priorities, the stuff that you really do care about because you failed. Like if you fail something that you don't really care at, you're like, whatever, bye. Right. And that's a good indication, like, I actually didn't care. Whereas if you approach it and you fail at it and you go, gosh, and you're kicking yourself and you're feeling it really deeply, well, that's a good reminder that you really do want it, that you really, really do want it. And you can find your true direction that way. Here's a little bit of a story time here. A few months ago now, I had a coaching consult with somebody who had found me through this podcast, actually. And they had come to me and had ideas, big ideas for their business, how we could potentially rewrite their business, basically. And of course, if you know me, my background is not in marketing. It is not in business development, but it is in messaging. It is in storytelling. It is in how to craft a message, how to say things so that you elicit the response that you want. And when we had gotten on the call, there were a lot of things happening on this call, and it eventually came to the point where I knew I'm learning, especially in being a business owner and running multiple businesses at one time, that it's best for me to be transparent up front. I would much rather somebody give me the no, reject me. I would rather fail at the front before I've put a lot of time and energy into the project. So I have found that if I'm not the right person, I want to be so upfront about that in the beginning so that, I don't waste my time and I don't waste theirs, if we're honest. And so we'd had this conversation. We've been talking for half an hour, 45 minutes, and it came to the point where I needed to pitch myself and say what I thought I was able to do. And I remember thinking in this phone call, I don't believe that I have exactly what this person is looking for. But what I'm going to do instead is give them the option for what I can provide and let them decide if that's what they want. So I did. And this person paused and I watched their face process, and they told me that that just wasn't the price point they were planning on paying. And so I took a breath and I calmly asked, "All right, may I ask, what was the investment you were planning on making for a project like this?" And when they came back to me with their number, and we kind of had to have this back and forth where I just said, listen, ultimately the type of work that you are hoping to do is going to be a higher investment. At least with me it is. And it is totally okay if this does not feel like the right time for this particular connection. But these are my prices, and this is sort of how I work. And we ended the call. I didn't feel particularly, I don't know, I didn't feel particularly relaxed about how the call ended, because I think that this person was maybe processing out loud and some things should have stayed in their head. And sometimes sometimes you just have to let people process, and sometimes they say things that are maybe not really for your ears. And I got off the call and I told this person that I would look at my numbers and see if there was an alternative package that I could offer. And as I sat with it and sat with it and sat with it and thought to myself, well, I don't want to lose the client. Like, I would rather have the client than not have the client. The more that I also realized that, actually, wait, do I want this client? Like, if we're not a good fit, it's going to be, multiple weeks of working with somebody who maybe we are actually not on the same page, and we aren't right now. And I ended up writing an email that was very kind, because, as you know, I am fiercely kind, but unapologetically bold, if you remember the tagline here. And I just said, listen, at this current moment, while I totally understand that you are trying to be very specific and strategic with how you spend your money as you look at this pivot, these are my prices, and I am not currently open to dropping them. Now, I can offer you a smaller package. I can offer you a different type of package, but ultimately, like, the investment level is going to be like in the same line. And then I just said at the end, I want you to make a decision that makes the best sense for you. I want you to feel confident and excited about how you are spending the money to benefit your business. And if that means that this connection is not right for this current season, I hope you and I can stay in touch as we both evolve. And I sent that email off. I'm remembering it perfectly because I wrote it and rewrote it so many times. And I was so nervous. I sent it off and I really had to make peace with the fact that I probably wasn't going to get the client. And so I sent it off and assumed that I wasn't going to get a response. And about a week later, maybe 10 days, I got a response. And this person just exclaimed where they were in that current week, and kind of, where some of the comments that had been made were potentially coming from, and took accountability for kind of their headspace, and then said, this actually looks really great. I'm really excited about this. And it ended up being a really positive interaction. I know now that moving forward, this person is going to purchase this package, and I felt really excited that not only did I take the risk knowing that I might lose this client, which I will admit is a privileged place to be, right? Knowing that you can release the thing, but I just have to have faith that if this client did not want to work with me with everything that I had brought forward, that we weren't going to be the right fit in the first place, right? So this is the filtering. It helps you find your people, your priorities, the right direction. It's giving you feedback for what is working, what is not working for people. Because sometimes someone might say, my prices are too high, or my prices don't work, or this isn't specific enough. And I can take that info and say, okay, what part of that is true? How can I assess? How can I reassess the way that I am pitching my packages, and the way that I'm creating my offerings? Helps me refine. Okay. So again, this initial, what I feel like was not necessarily a failure. It was more of an address, like two people coming together with kind of a disagreement here. But not being afraid to lose the client, to know that a better one was on its way. I mentioned when I got off that call, I felt shame. I felt embarrassed because there was some commentary on my prices, and which by the way have been my prices for a while, which have been confirmed by many other companies, and have been people have bought these packages many times before. But I got off this call and felt embarrassed. I felt like someone was telling me that I was conceited or that I was too big for my britches. And suddenly that feeling of, am I charging too much? Am I too confident? Am I too much? All those stories are really coming up. And is this too muchness going to lose me a potential opportunity? It was really uncomfortable. And I had to sit with myself, and I had to call my girlfriends, and my the strong ass women in my life rallied around me and were like, fuck no, that's not correct. And really, put my head back on my shoulders. I I know now, again, as I mentioned, this was a redirection. And whether or not this person ends up purchasing a package, the experience of having to talk myself through this experience ended up being the most valuable part, right? So at this point, this person is still not purchased, and that's okay, because I know that I'm in alignment with myself. And even if that's considered a failure, then I think it will lead to better things in the future. So, as a reminder, if you were listening to this story, failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is how we get to the success, right? I think sometimes I listen to people who are in different stages of life than me, and I will be super transparent here that I have heard more than once, like, oh well, you're so lucky, or yeah, well, like you've got it all together, and kind of discounting all the stuff that has happened from the pivot of my careers until now. And I just have to keep saying to myself, I've just tried more things and failed, right? I've just tried more things and failed more times to get to this point. And I'm saying this out loud and I'm hearing it. And I think if I was in a moment of failure and someone said this to me, I'd truly be like, screw you, failure sucks. And it does. But truly try and zoom out and remind yourself that every failure is a small auto correction to the place where you're supposed to be. Let's talk about the rebrand, the tools that make failure work for you. Okay. I I want to give failure a new meaning in my life. I don't want failure to be a red flag. I want it to be like a stepping stone. I don't want it to be like a stop sign, right? I want it to be a mirror. I want it to be a mirror. I want it to show me what I'm supposed to be doing, or what I'm supposed to have done, or what I can do for next time. So, firstly, the rebranding toolkit here, we need to normalize it. Everybody has failed, and some have failed spectacularly. Some people have failed publicly and out in the open and in front of a million people, and have lost a shit ton of money and all of their dignity. But the difference is that those successful people, those people you admire, they just didn't stop there, right? I think that number two, we have to name it. Like, when you fail, it's not just, I'm a failure, everything is the worst, I'm a bad person, I should just go like lay down in a hole now. We have to get specific about what exactly didn't work. What about this process lent itself to the thing not being successful? What was the strategy here? And was there one? Did I show up in the way that I was planning on it? What did the timing look like? What did my energy look like coming forward? And I think if we ask ourselves those questions when things don't go out the way that we planned, sometimes we'll find that yes, there are things we can do for next time. If it was in our control, amazing, we can do it for next time. But if there were things that happened that were not in our control, bye-bye. You know what I mean? Jesus, take the wheel. I'm gesturing for the people who are listening to this. Uh, If it's not working, if it's out of our control, we got to let it be free. If it was in our control, it's just good data for next time. Number 3 is you got to nurture it. Like, what did the failure, what did the not successful thing teach you about yourself? You know, what did it teach you about your needs? What did it teach you about your boundaries? What did it teach you about your voice? Number 4 is, what is the next move? Okay. Making the best next move. It is not about, I think that's the trick, at least for me, is I tend to look way far down the line. And I think to myself, okay, I want to get to that point way over there. And I feel like this first step, the very first step, that's going to determine if I get there. No, it's not. That's not how airplanes work. Everyone knows this analogy, but it is one of my favorite. When an airplane takes off, if it took off and then flew in the same direction that it was flying the whole time, you would end up in a totally different country, right? The airplane is making constant teeny weeny corrections as it goes. It's only making the next right step every, however many minutes, the next right move. It's not going in one direction the whole time. And so constantly thinking, what is the next right step? Not what is the perfect one, but just what is the next right step? And then, I wrote some of these down, affirmations for failure, because I have to say these to myself. I have to say these to myself. So maybe these work for you. I am not my last mistake. We are not defined by our failures. I am not defined by my failures. This was a fun one. A risk is a compliment to my courage. That's nice. That's really nice. A risk is a compliment to my courage. Another one, this is just the messy middle, not the end of the story, right? I think that's the other part too, is like when you think, I've said this visualization before, when you think this thing is about to be the biggest thing, most likely it's not. Like, most likely it is not. And 5 years down the line, you're just going to remember this as a teeny tiny detail that perhaps was a pivotal detail, but perhaps meant nothing. And so I'm always trying to meet myself. Like, if I could talk to myself from 5 years ago, what would I say? And then that feeling that I have as the person I am now, talking to the person that I am 5 years ago, now put myself in the shoes of myself from 5 years from now, the shoes of myself who is 5 years from now, and talk to myself today. And that feels really nice. I'm sorry. I saw that on TikTok and I can't stop doing it. And then lastly, I thought this one was fun. I don't need a perfect track record. I just need the traction, right? I just need, again, the data points, the information that propels me to the next thing. I would be so curious if you're listening to this and you think to yourself, wow, I have a failure story. Please send it my way. Please, please send it my way. I love listening to how people have tried things out and failed miserably, because I think we end up looking at those things as, again, either funny moments or pivotal moments, or they end up being nothing and you're like, oh, a dream. Anyways, now I have been here talking your face off. If you are listening or watching on YouTube or elsewhere, truly a dream, an absolute gift to have you here. That's actually where this podcast began, is I just said to myself, I don't want the fear of failing. My only goal with this podcast is to have a space to share my ideas, to create another arm for people to discover the way that I work with people, both in my real estate business and as a coach, and to not make it that deep. You know what I mean? Like, this space is my safe space where if you like me and you enjoy listening, oh my gosh, look at us. We're all here together. It's not that deep, honey, And this is just, I don't have to worry about failing because I did this. I did this. I chose to be here. There's no stakes yet. Yet. So I want to reiterate this messaging here. If you are waiting until the risk is set at 0, you will wait forever. If you are waiting until you are perfect, you will stay invisible. Okay? If you are waiting until the risk is 0, you will wait forever. If you are waiting until you are perfect, you will stay invisible. I'm curious where you think you might be playing not to lose Like, what if you are noticing there are areas where you're just thinking to myself, well, I don't want to mess up. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. What about what you do want to do? What would shift if you gave yourself permission to fail? If you gave yourself permission to fall down and then keep going anyway? So, my hopes for you again, if you have moments of failure that you feel like would be fun or interesting that you want to, if you're on YouTube, you want to comment below, or if you are connected to me via my Instagram or elsewhere, please send it my way. I love reading them, and maybe perhaps I will read them anonymously at some day. You can also send me a voice memo, which I personally love. Maybe I will make it some type of an episode around this. Who knows? It'll be anonymous, of course. If there's anything in this episode that you feel resonated with you, that you feel might touch somebody else or help them make the next right step and brush off this fear of potentially failing, please share it with them. And my last note here is I want you to be brave enough to fail. It is not weakness. It's bad bitch energy. You know what I mean? It's kind bitch energy, if we're honest. It's being kind to yourself. And that's the energy I want you walking away and making your next bold move with. All of that said, thank you so, so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day whenever and wherever you are listening. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.